Hey,
Hi, Andrew.
it's Pause It For Me once again.
Yeah.
I have a question.
Mm-hmm.
You've seen an extremely goofy movie, right?
Absolutely, I have.
That movie is about Max going to college
Yep.
and Goofy coming with him,
Mm-hmm.
tagging along, as it were.
Yes.
What did Max go to college for?
Did they say? You know what, though? I think in the States, you could just go to school for something and you don't have to pick your major right away. Which seems like a waste of time.
That's very strange. Did he go to college just to play in the X Games?
Max?
Max Goof, yes, the one and only.
He went to college because, like, that's the thing to do, you know?
Okay, fair enough.
What did Goof go to school for?
A degree. that's all I
college
remember.
degree.
Just a degree. Doesn't matter in what.
I guess it doesn't really matter in the long run, eh?
No, it truly doesn't. So, we are now back to our lesson in film history, as we're calling
Whoop,
it.
whoop.
As I said before, it's basically going along and hitting some of the big movies throughout film history that Hannah and I never watched for some reason, whether it was due to lack of interest or just thinking that we wouldn't.
It's just always on
outright
the
wouldn't
bucket
like
list
it.
sometimes, you know?
Yeah. And so this time we watched Some Like It Hot from
Absolutely.
1959, which was it earned its place on the list from Hannah, not from me. You were interested in it.
Absolutely. I mean, I would say I'm a decently big fan of 50s content. You know, one of my
Sure.
favorite shows is I Love Lucy, and it takes place around that time period, kind of like a zany comedy era with sort of like glamorous stars and stuff. So that was definitely appealing to me, and it's considered one of the greatest comedy films of all time, and you know, on the AFI 100. And I'm like, you know, I like comedies. I like the 50s. I got to give it a watch. And it's been on the bucket list for like a decade, probably.
Your bucket list.
Yeah.
Yeah. I wasn't really interested. I knew the title and that's it. I didn't know what it was about. And I knew it had Mare Lynne Mun Row in it. What did you know before going in?
I knew that it was Mare Lynne Mun Row.
Mare Lynne Mun Row.
And yeah. And Tony Curtis. And I knew that he and Jack Lemmon had to dress up as women. And
see, I didn't know
was
that.
friends with Mare Lynne Mun Row.
I didn't even know that Jack Lemmon was in it.
Right.
And I do like Jack Lemmon because we've seen him in The Odd Couple.
He's a funny.
We've seen him in
funny
Glengarry
guy.
Glen Ross.
Much later in his career. Yeah.
And I will just tell you that I'm coming into this podcast episode with a big smile on my face because I really liked it.
Yeah. It was a great time. I was so happy to watch it.
Not only did I really like it, I think it is an easy contender for best comedy of all time.
It's certainly a classic
It's-
for a reason.
It's not perfect, and we'll
No,
get
no,
into
no.
that in a little bit.
It's very contemporary in some ways, though.
Well, I agree. I felt like it had aged remarkably well,
sure.
considering the subject matter.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like if they're dressing up as women, if the two main male characters are cross-dressing, there's an easy route that could go down that, you know, joke-wise
A little more misogynistic,
could not age
perhaps.
well.
Yeah.
But I thought it aged very well.
Yeah. A lot of the comedy lied in the men realizing that women have it hard and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And so I found that charming.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't think that, you know, women having it difficult is ever going to become an irrelevant topic.
No.
Yeah.
I mean, considering, like, I think women are in a great place now, but there's always going to be like a little bit of a cultural imbalance because we only gained the right to vote like 100 years ago. And back then, you know, in the 50s, it was still very fresh.
So for the sake of the audience, if you don't know what Some Like It Hot is about, it is a PG film directed by Billy Wilder, like I said, from 1959. 2 hours and 1 minute. Just long for a comedy, I felt.
I don't know. I feel like in that era, they tended to make like 2-hour films no matter what. They would just stuff it with musical numbers and stuff.
And so it stars Jack Lemmon, Tony Curtis, and Mare Lynne Mun Row. And the logline is, after two male musicians witness a mob hit, they flee the state in an all-female band disguised as women, but further complications set in.
That was really intriguing because I didn't really know the gangster element of this film. So when it started with like just the gangsters on screen for like the first couple minutes, like Mare Lynne Mun Row is not even introduced until like maybe like 20 minutes, 30 minutes.
I think it was more like 30 minutes. Yeah.
Yeah. It was interesting how they did the slow play more back then. Like they would be on the poster, but they wouldn't necessarily appear right away. Like Jack Lemmon and Tony Curtis don't even appear probably for like the first like 5 minutes.
Yeah, I'd say so. I'm glad that I didn't see the poster beforehand because it would have spoiled for me that they dress up like women. Because when they first float the idea in the movie, it's like immediately rejected. They're like, "There's no way we're doing that. That's stupid."
So you couldn't see that coming, I guess.
No, I was like, okay, we're writing that out. But even jumping back before that, like I said, I went in not excited. I only knew the title, and I had never seen a Mare Lynne Mun Row movie.
Okay.
So I didn't know if it was going to be my thing.
Sure.
And the very, very beginning of the movie did not set a good tone for me.
No.
Do you know what I'm going to say?
Well, here's the thing is I think a lot of people's, blanket impression of Mare Lynne Mun Row is what we generally see in the media is where she's just like more like an object, whereas, oh, she's just like a pretty girl or whatever. And the way they introduced her, it's like, oh, here's this pretty girl. She's pretty ditzy, eh? But like she has a lot of comedic chops that you don't really get to see right away. And I think she's a very underrated comedian.
Sure. But that's not where I was going when I was saying the beginning didn't impress me or it didn't set a good tone.
Sure.
I'm talking like the very, very, very beginning, like the first 2 minutes.
Okay.
I felt like it was like one of the most boring opening credits scenes I've ever seen. And you know this about me. I think that opening credits are a great opportunity to flex some creativity because anything goes, especially if you're using animation.
Well, credits were boring back then.
Well, for a few more years, I guess so.
Sure,
but
except
I'm
for
sure
maybe like Hitchcock.
We could find, could find some movies around that time
James
that
Bond.
had some good opening credits.
Yeah.
Again, not for a few years for those.
Yeah.
But just what they chose to do with the credits was just
I don't
nothing.
even remember really.
Exactly. It was nothing to write home about. So I was like, okay, here we go. And then, bang! As soon as the credits were over, badass opening scene with
Definitely.
like chase scene that was like. It wasn't what you would think maybe a chase scene of the 50s would be. Like it was hard hitting. There was like gunshots and like windows being blown out and cars swerving. I was like, this is awesome.
You could tell that they were trying to appeal like to both sides. They're like, this is going to be a good date night movie. It has like the action sequences, it has the gags, it has the heart, it has like a musical number. They're like trying to do everything.
They were. I would agree with that. By the way, I'm not trying to say like a movie has to have a car chase to be good. That's completely not what I'm saying. But I am saying a movie needs to be engaging to be good. It needs to hook the audience in, and in my eyes, it needs to be entertaining.
It was a good way to be engaging.
Personally. Yeah.
Right off the bat. Like, I feel like of that era, you don't see a lot of cold opens. Sure. The only one I can think of that is around that time period, but like maybe like 10 years later, is Charade. Charade has like a cold open.
I don't think I've seen that.
No, but I recommend it. It's Audrey Hepburn and another, whoever the guy is in His Girl Friday. It's a really cute sort of like mystery rom-com.
Cary Grant?
Yeah, he's very charming.
Fair enough, yeah. Well, so I'm just kind of going through my notes in chronological order here as I watch the movie. And so it takes place in 1929.
Mm-hmm. I didn't know that either.
Going in.
Because Mare Lynne doesn't really dress like the 1920s. Like the guys do.
The guys do, yeah.
Which is, I think maybe that's partially why maybe they picked that time period is because the silhouettes were a lot more masculine anyway. So it was easy to hide, their identities. I don't know.
Mm-hmm. So it took place in 1929 and was made in 1959. But the way that the movie was shot felt more like it was like the early 40s, I would say.
Because it was black
30s.
And white?
Well, yeah, it was black and white. But just like the whole vibe of the movie.
Fast talking?
Like this was a few years after Searchers and a few years after Gone with the Wind.
Yep.
Right? This felt like it could have been made like 20 years before either of those movies.
Mm-hmm. Well,
do you agree with that?
Yeah, in a way. We saw the black and white version. There's probably a colorized version. I don't know what was the theatrical run of it. But, Gone with the Wind, I think, was designed to be more of a blockbuster movie. So it had the high budget and, the color effects and everything. Whereas this film was probably designed to be like more of like a mid-tier release,
I suppose. But even still, like Gone with the Wind, I believe, was Academy ratio. And this was Academy ratio being 1.33 to 1. And this was 1.85 to 1. So even though it was widescreen,
surprising,
it still felt much older.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Like it would be like if we watched a movie that came out today, but it felt like it was made in the 90s.
Maybe intentionally so,
But it didn't, because you could argue that it's trying to pull a vibe like from the 20s, because that's when it takes place, but it's not quite, doesn't quite feel that old. If they were doing that on purpose, I would say they probably would have filmed in Academy ratio.
Well, it's an interesting thing is they were adapting it from a French film, which might have been from like the 30s. So maybe
Some Like It Hot.
Yeah. So
Interesting.
So some of those elements that maybe gave the vibe that it was older is maybe because they adapted it from an older film.
Okay.
I don't know.
I just mean like the visual vibe felt quite old.
Yeah, it kind of blends together until we get to like more like the Wild West of filmmaking, where you have like 60s experimental films, like French New Wave and stuff. Before that, like Hollywood movies kind of the talkie era just kind of blend together.
Yeah, I suppose so, to a certain degree. So the standout part of this film, in my opinion, and I think you'll agree, is the script.
Sure.
Super tight script. Just like,
I love that.
And it was funny. It was funny.
It's very timeless.
Like generally they say that a good comedy should have at least like one laugh a minute, I feel like, right?
Sure.
I was laughing at pretty much everything in this movie. Like I was laughing a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And I wasn't high, I promise.
And the actors in general, just they picked good actors that can make non-funny statements be funny, And I think a lot of that, I think Billy Wilder is known for his comedies and stuff. So it would have been like maybe like a Judd Apatow of the time, where he's like, I'm going to pick these like really naturally comedically funny people, and they're just going to have this really funny vibe to them,
Yeah. Jumping back, I just realized I have a piece of trivia about this. Whether or not it was shot, it was shot in black and white. And this says, Mare Lynne Mun Row wanted the movie to be shot in color. Her contract stipulated that all her films were to be in color, but Billy Wilder convinced her to let it be shot in black and white when costume tests revealed that the makeup that Tony Curtis and Jack Lemmon wore gave their faces a green tinge. So it was definitely intended.
They're doing color correction on their face, I guess.
It's definitely intended to be in black and white.
Okay, that's interesting. Her first film where she made her debut, All About Eve, came about the early 50s, I don't know exactly when, but maybe like 8 years prior. But, a lot had progressed from the early 50s to the late 50s. And I guess after All About Eve, she had enough star power that she could be like, from now on, nah, so I don't know.
Yeah. We'll loop back to talking about Mare Lynne in a second. So the script, I just like, I was so happy to see a well-written comedy that just had like smart jokes that you couldn't see coming, or at least that I didn't see coming. It was just like, it was a joy to watch this movie.
Yeah, fairly timeless.
Some of the lines that I wrote down is like when they're talking about not having enough money and he wants to sell the upright bass, and Jack Lemmon's like, we're up the creek and you want to hawk the paddle. I'm like, that's good.
That was a really good one.
And then when Tony Curtis's character ditches his girlfriend, I guess, or a woman that he's dating, and he goes, he makes up this story about Jack Lemmon's like tooth being infected or something.
Oh yeah.
And he's like, oh, I'm so sorry. You know, I'll make it up to you. And she's like, you're making it up pretty good so far. I'm like, oh, that's
really
good.
funny.
That's a good one.
Yeah. And they're like, your blood type is O. Oh.
Yeah, like this is almost a masterclass in comedy writing. You know, I'm no expert, so I take that with a
You're
grain of salt.
You're an enjoyer of comedy. I would,
yeah,
I
just
would
like
say the same.
the number of jokes per minute, the plant and payoff, the running gags, like the type O blood came up a couple of times.
Yeah, it was silly.
Really, really good plant and payoff, and I was excited to see plant and payoff in certain moments because there was a point in the movie where I think you and I were both kind of like, are they going to return to the mob subplot? Because it's been a while since we talked about it.
And it was like, is this just like the premise and they're never going to speak about it again? But it did have a good payoff. And I think a good important element of this film that I think could be studied in film classes is a good use of plant and payoff with something as innocuous as the mob boss's like sock shoe kind of thing.
His spats.
Sure. I don't know.
That's why it was called spats. Because he wore spats.
Oh, I didn't get that.
Like how toothpick was called toothpick because he had a toothpick.
Okay, I didn't know that was called spats.
And you know how like Scarface, it's called Scarface because he has a scar on his face.
Yeah, that makes sense. So they showed his spats, like they showed it in a much earlier, like in one of the opening scenes, it getting spilled. So then as the audience, our attention is drawn to his spats. And then you see it a couple times throughout the movie. And it's like kind of a foreshadowing element.
It's a really good
motif.
motif.
Immediately who this is.
Yeah. But which, by the way, in that scene where the drink was spilled on his spats, that was Spats' fault. Like
I don't think Spats cared.
I know the guy was drunk and he was kind of waving his cup around like this, but he clearly had it out and Spats was not looking where he was going and bumped into his outstretched arm. That was Spats' fault, man. Come on.
Yeah.
Get real.
Someone like Spats is like, no witnesses. You know, so...
Yeah. So it's aged well. Great script. I was laughing here, there, and everywhere, especially when they were like, okay, you're going to be Josephine, you're going to be Geraldine. Josephine, Geraldine. Josephine, Geraldine. And then they get to introduce themselves, and he's like, I'm Josephine. And he's like, I'm Daphne.
He's like, I don't like Geraldine. And I'm Daphne.
Great charisma. You know, Tony Curtis and Jack Lemmon both did phenomenal jobs in this movie. And Jack Lemmon, I even had this thought before you vocalized it, but Jack Lemmon would have made a fair Joker.
That's kind of what I was thinking. Like, not in a bad way. It just is the way he was smiling with the makeup on. Like, he looked like Joker.
He did a Joker-esque laugh a couple of times.
He was like with a really creepy smile.
Yeah, it was like kind of like Jack Nicholson's laugh a little bit.
Definitely.
Yeah. That he would have been a good like 50s 60s Joker. Yeah, interesting. An alternate reality where that might have happened would be interesting to see.
Well, do you know who's in the apartment?
Jack Lemmon.
Yeah.
And I don't know who else.
Well, I think it's Billy Wilder.
The Apartment is the movie that we're watching next, by the way.
And isn't that exciting?
Yeah. I was more excited for The Apartment than I was for Some
Really?
Like It Hot. And not that I know what The Apartment is about. I really don't.
Oh,
but
I do.
I think maybe I just had this preconceived notion that I wouldn't like Marilyn Monroe movies. I don't know.
Okay.
But let's talk about Marilyn.
Yes. Okay, so give me your impression or like what you thought Marilyn Monroe movies would be like and what you felt like her on-screen presence would be like.
I guess kind of shallow.
Sure.
You know, kind of, well, it struck me. I had this thought at a certain point and I was like, I can't believe this isn't talked about more. Harley Quinn is so Marilyn Monroe.
Oh, yeah.
Like,
absolutely.
Not in every scene in this movie, but one scene in particular. I think the scene where she was kind of sloshing around drunk a little bit. I was thinking like, this is almost exactly Harley Quinn, you know? And I'm not talking about Margot Robbie Harley Quinn. I'm talking more like Batman the Animated Series, Arlene Sorkin Harley Quinn, like more original Harley Quinn. Like
Just like
I
a
feel
soft baby voice.
I feel that
thing.
there was so much taken from Mare Lynne there,
Mhm.
which I was happy to see because Harley Quinn is hilarious.
Sure.
I love Harley Quinn. But yeah, maybe just like shallow and breathy, and she was breathy.
Yeah.
I
I think that's like more like the caricature version of her, you know? Like she's aware that she's playing a ditzy, dumb character. Like that's the shtick.
don't know really what I expected. Like I didn't really think about it too hard.
Mm-hmm.
But what I will say, after having seen the movie, she's funny. Was that her real singing voice when she was singing?
That I'm not sure
It
about.
was pretty good if it was.
Yeah.
And if it wasn't.
Yeah, then whatever.
But I'll try to choose my words carefully here. I can see where the massive appeal
Absolutely.
is for her.
She's very charming, very accessible because
Yeah, it's like
she's the sexy born yesterday kind of vibe, you know?
well,
You know what I mean?
depends on the role, but like I don't know. I don't know if I fully agree with that for this film.
Sure.
And I'm not really a big fan of that trope. And we watched Poor Things recently, and that movie was like the epitome of that trope, and I did not like Poor
Literally.
Things for that reason.
Yeah.
But more so what I mean is like she's more than just it's more so than she's just like an attractive woman and a sex symbol. Like something about her presence on screen is so magnetic and just
Absolutely.
like melting. You know,
Absolutely.
like I feel my eyes and face just like melting watching the screen. It's such a subliminal kind of feeling. And I'm like, that's so strange.
She's a
that's a
natural
thing.
charm.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, like, in I think what was her film debut or like sort of her breakout role, All About Eve, she plays a supporting character in that movie. And then she kind of becomes the breakout star in that movie. And it's ironic because that movie is about an older starlet being pushed out by a new up and comer. So to see that actually happen in real life is very bizarre. But she, like, All About Eve is a great movie. And she plays like a very small character, but the scenes that she is given, she just like she takes these like small moments and makes them really memorable comedic moments. So I can see, you know, just maybe like 8 years later in her career, that's like up a notch, that she just has this natural charm about what she's saying.
Yeah. I was pleasantly surprised. You know, she was funny. I thought she was a good actress in this role. I think her presence was definitely appreciated. You know, she rounded out the trio very nicely. And I wouldn't be surprised if this film specifically inspired hundreds of other films where there's like 2 male leads and 1 female lead.
Definitely.
Can probably point to dozens. Now, would you say how would you say this ranks within cross-dressing movies for you?
Okay.
Whether it's Tootsie, Mrs. Doubtfire, I don't know. Does Tu Wong Fu count, or are they transgender in that movie?
They're drag queens, so I would say that's cross-dressing, except for Patrick Swayze's character, who I think it's more of like a permanent thing.
Yeah, and Priscilla, Queen of the Desert, as well.
Yeah, that's a little borderline as well.
Well, they're in drag in that, and then I believe Terrence Stamp's character is transgender. So how
did it rank with that? Well, you haven't seen Tootsie, right?
I saw it a long time ago when I was too young to really like appreciate it.
I like Tootsie. I think there's some similar elements to that where it's like you have like a guy that's maybe like a little misogynistic or like misguided, through pretending to be a woman understands the female condition more. Yeah,
I guess when I think about it, Tootsie, Mrs. Doubtfire, and this are kind of in a separate category to Tu Wong Fu and Priscilla, Queen of the Desert. Because those movies are about drag queens who love dressing up in drag. Whereas Mrs. Doubtfire, Tootsie, and this
they're pretending.
They feel like they
have
to because they're scheming, you know? So I guess out of the 3.
Very specific.
Yeah.
Okay. I do.
I could probably think of more off the top of my head.
I do think like Mrs. Doubtfire is maybe like a little bit of a guilty pleasure movie. I don't know if all of it has aged well, but I do think there's some moments of that movie that still just make me laugh out loud.
Yeah.
I don't know. Some Like It Hot. That's this one for the ages. It's a classic. I think it should be on all those lists where it's like, 1,000 movies before you die, like that kind of thing. Best, 200, 300 films of all time. Definitely.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, I love loving movies.
Yeah, me too.
It warms my heart to see a great movie. I felt
it's so invigorating.
Yeah, I felt the same way when we saw Bicycle Thieves, where I was like, guess what? I loved it.
Yes.
Like it's
so great.
It's so much more fun to love good movies than to hate on bad movies.
Absolutely.
Even if they deserve it.
That's how I felt coming off of watching Whatever Happened with Baby Jane. I was like, I love movies. I want to see lots of good war movies. It was just like, oh, it was just so good.
Yeah. I got some more trivia for you here that I think you'll find interesting. Mm-hmm. So here's a little story. Jack Lemmon wrote that the first sneak preview had a bad reaction with many audience walkouts.
Okay, yeah.
Many studio personnel and agents offered advice to Billy Wilder on what scenes to reshoot, add, and cut. Jack Lemmon asked Billy Wilder what he was going to do. Wilder responded, "Why, nothing. This is a very funny movie, and I believe in it just as it is. Maybe this is the wrong neighborhood in which to have shown it. At any rate, I don't panic over one preview. It's a hell of a movie." Wilder held the next preview in the Westwood section of Los Angeles, and the audience stood up and cheered. That's what I'm talking about.
That's some commitment. Yeah, nice Tom Peters impression. That's what I'm talking about. Yeah. I like that he's committed to his project and he's like, no, I think this is good. I'm not going to change it for anyone else. I'm not going to water this down for someone else. That's
some good belief in what you got.
And it certainly paid off. And I think it's really interesting because this film is one of the things that dissolved the Hays Code and made it
this film
because it was seen as controversial at the time, the topics that they were approaching.
Interesting.
And so you see how this devolves and how film gradually gets more open and less restrictive as the years go on, because this is like 59. And then in the 60s and the 70s, we start to get crazy. Woo,
Yeah.
So You Must Remember This has a really fascinating series about all the changes going through all the rating systems throughout like the 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s. And it's really fascinating to see the progression of what is acceptable on film and what is not acceptable on film throughout the years.
Well, it's nice to hear you shout out a nice little small-time podcast that probably, really needs our help to succeed.
Yeah.
So,
it's a great podcast. What can I say? If you like this one, you're going to love that one. Your kids are going to love it.
Couple other pieces of trivia here. So I don't know how much you know about this. I'm learning about this for the first time. Apparently, Mare Lynne Mun Row was not the easiest to work with on set.
Yeah, I think she was addicted to pills and stuff. I don't know if she was murdered or she died, like Jim Morrison kind of thing. But either way, she had sort of a tragic death surrounding like substance abuse and stuff. I think, Hollywood's a tough industry, especially in the 50s, the studio system. They were probably extremely restrictive about her diet and her looks and stuff. I know they were with Judy Garland. And
you're probably right.
I'm sure it's like, someone like Mare Lynne Mun Row, she's still an icon and she's been gone for like 70 years. So imagine in the height of her fame, that's a lot to take in. A lot of stars broke during stuff like that. Like Winona Ryder had like a breakdown for like a while when she was at the height of her career. Like it's just a lot to handle, having all that public pressure on you that, and a couple years prior, she wasn't dealing with that. That's a huge life change. And I don't think everyone can handle it.
Yeah. Well, I don't know how to segue from what you just said into this piece of trivia, but I'll just read it and the audience can take it at face value. Mare Lynne Mun Row required 47 takes to get "it's me, sugar" correct, instead saying either "sugar, it's me" or "it's sugar, me." After take 30, Billy Wilder had the line written on a blackboard. Another scene required Monroe to rummage through some drawers and say, "Where's the bourbon?" After 40 takes of her saying, "Where's the whiskey? Where's the bottle? Or where's the bonbon?" Wilder pasted the correct line in one of the drawers. After Monroe became confused about which drawer contained the line, Wilder had it pasted in every drawer. 59 takes were required for this scene, and when she finally does say it, she has her back to the camera, leading some to wonder if Wilder finally gave up and had it dubbed.
Probably. Well, it's funny because I was reading about that as well, that she was hard to work with. So they blocked off 3 days to do the beach scene with the Shell oil guy, and she nailed it in 20 minutes.
Nice.
So I guess she can perform when she wants to.
She can bring it. Yeah. And then following up on that, after shooting was completed, Billy Wilder threw a celebration dinner at his home for cast members and friends. Mare Lynne Monroe was not invited. The crushed star had to have it explained to her that she had cost the production roughly $500,000 with her delays and unprofessional behavior. Wilder had generally unkind things to say about her after this film. When asked if he would do another project with her, he replied, "My doctor and my psychiatrist tell me I am too old and too rich to go through this again." After reading some of the things Wilder said about her in print, Monroe called his home and told his wife to please give her the message to go f*** himself. Wilder changed his tune later, commenting, "It takes a real artist to come on set and not know her lines and yet give the performance she did." A year later, at the premiere of The Apartment, Monroe threw her arms around him, told him how much she loved the picture, and whispered that she would like to play the lead in Irma la Douce, a role that eventually went to Shirley MacLaine.
Interesting. Well, they had worked together a couple years prior on the 7-Year Itch, and she definitely was the standout role of that film. She was the female lead, and there was a male lead, and the male lead I felt like was kind of blah, but she was really interesting and engaging. But I think maybe I don't know, she was just going through something there, and I could understand from the director's perspective being like, I don't need to do this, 50 takes. That's insane. No matter how good of an actress you are, like that's too many. So I can see both sides of it for sure.
I understand that. A couple more positive comments before we move into a little bit of the negative. I don't know if you have anything negative to say, but I have a criticism.
Okay.
That we'll get to in a second.
Sure.
Smoothest title drop I've ever seen.
Yeah, I like that.
Some Like It Hot.
Yeah, because I wasn't expecting that. We play it hot.
And he's like, "Oh, I suppose some like it hot, but I prefer jazz." So he says something like that.
Yeah.
Really good scene. When she's singing towards the end of the movie, when she's like, "I'm through with love, I'll never love again," I was thinking to myself, man, this song is familiar. Where do I know this song from? Did she sing it earlier in the movie? What is going on? Why do I know this song? And I realized it's the song that Mary Jane sings at the end of Spider-Man 3.
Oh.
When Peter comes to the jazz club, like right at the end of the movie. It's the very last scene. That's what she's singing.
That's cool.
Yeah.
This is full circle moment. You probably didn't know that was like an homage to Some Like It Hot, I guess.
No, definitely did not. And then the ending was great. Banger ending.
Yeah, they had sort of their fairy tale moment. They got away.
They had a fairy tale moment, but it also ended on a really solid joke.
It was very silly, but very sort of like progressive for its time. Like, nobody is perfect.
I won't ruin it for the audience out there if you do want to watch it, but it's a good ending for a comedy, I'd say. Now, as far as the negative goes.
Yeah, I would like to hear your criticism.
Unfortunately, it's not a perfect movie.
Okay.
And right around the halfway point, maybe 2/3 of the way into the movie, it starts to really slow down. When they get to the yacht, and there's the whole scene about Marilyn trying to get Tony Curtis's character's mojo back, if you want to put it in Austin Powers terms. It's just such a slow scene, and it would have gone so much better if they had constantly cut between him on the boat and Jack Lemmon with the other guy.
They sort of did, but half-heartedly.
Very half-heartedly, yeah. I think that scene should have been cut down by 2/3.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
And just like clip along that
Cut the fat.
part of the movie, cut the fat, because at that point I started to say to myself, like, this is no longer about them trying to hide and like cross-dress, pretend to be women and get away from the mob. Like, we're so far removed from that at this point. And thankfully it wasn't too long after that before the mob subplot finally came back. But I was willing to sit with most of Act 2 while they're pretending to be women, and we're getting a lot of hilarity out of that. But now all of a sudden we're like really deep into this subplot of Tony Curtis and Marilyn Monroe like actually kind of falling in love. And I'm like, that's fine, but that's not what the whole rest of the movie was setting up. And now we're spending a bit too much time on it.
Like, I think it was good in the, like, he gave her a bracelet and he's like, I did it because it was the right thing to do. Because earlier in the movie, he was just like hawking all their stuff.
It's great character development.
It was progression. But I think you still could have had that nice progression by just cutting some of the unnecessary bits of their date down. Cutting, like, more evenly balanced between Daphne's date and Shell Oil's date.
Yeah. I mean, just the way that scene was going, it's like she kisses him and she's like, are you feeling it now? And he's like, nope. And then she kisses him again and she's like, are you feeling it now? And he's like, nope, still nothing. Then she kisses him again and she's like, how about now? And he's like, nope, try again. And then she kisses him again. And it's like, okay.
We could have
been over and done with this by now.
Out, yeah.
It wasn't funny.
No.
It wasn't funny.
Mm-mm.
It
wasn't adding super much.
It was a scene that belonged in a different movie that was about something else.
I agree.
Yeah. So that's my criticism.
Yeah.
Did you have any criticisms?
I think of a lot of movies of that era is they tend to have a lot of unnecessary moments that can go on a little too long. Like, I really like Singing in the Rain, but there's like a good 10 minutes of that film where they just cut away and it's like a dream sequence where they're just doing a bunch of dancing for good 10 minutes.
We both feel the same way about that scene.
Yeah.
Very beautifully shot, very beautiful scene,
shot,
but has nothing to do with anything.
Could have been cut to like 30 seconds. Didn't need to be as long as it did. Like, if you're going to have a dream sequence, sure, do it. But like, it just clearly was there just to add length to the runtime. Like, come on. Like, it just didn't have anything to do with the rest of the movie.
Yeah. And especially with Some Like It Hot, like, it's already a pretty long movie. Over 2 hours for a comedy.
It was enjoyable.
Cutting down that yacht scene would have been a great way to keep a really nice pace and keep the laughs going and consistent while also trimming the fat in general and just keeping it in a nice tight runtime.
I agree.
So I would give it a 9 out of 10 or a 4.5 out of 5. Really, really still liked it in spite of that. Especially because I got a great vibe at like the 20-30 minute mark. Even at the 30-minute mark, I was like, as long as we keep moving along at this clip, this is a strong contender for best comedy of all time. And it picked up. It picked up after that yacht scene, and we returned to the mob plot, and we had a great killer ending and a great wrap up to the storyline about Tony Curtis and Marilyn Monroe falling in love.
And I appreciated that there was payoff to the millionaire courting Daphne, and it wasn't for naught.
Yeah, I agree. Mm-hmm. So really, really up there. I can't give it a 10. I reserve the 10.
I agree.
For the best of the best, but I will give it a 9, and I will say definitely one of my favorite comedies of all time. Aged 100%. Very well.
Yeah, and I was saying this to you at the end of the film, and it gave me a lot of those vibes. It gave me a lot of I Love Lucy vibes in the best way. Like, if you love like 1950s zany comedy, you're gonna love I Love Lucy. Because in the same way that Marilyn is kind of like a ditzy but like very clever comedian, so is Lucille Ball. And like sort of the zaniness of wearing lots of costumes and having lots of misunderstandings, it's all there. So it was super appealing to me too, and I would definitely give it like a 9, maybe a 9.5. I don't know.
You can't give it 9.5.
Feisty. Okay,
well,
4.
Okay, you know what? You can do whatever you want.
4 out of 5.
4 out of 5?
Yeah.
That would be an 8 out of 10.
What? I don't know.
You know what?
A 9.
Roger Ebert, 2 thumbs up. That's what we're doing.
Or like, I think it was like the Chicago newspaper where it's like either you had like a guy engaged in your seat or you had a guy kind of just like blah in the seat or you had a guy that left his seat.
That's really funny.
So it's like, is it like
I
great?
like that a lot, actually.
Or is it like good? Or is it like snoozeworthy? Cut the show.
That's cool. There's a lot of crossover between rating things out of 10 versus rating things out of 5. But if you're rating things out of 4 stars, what are you doing with your life?
I guess
Who asked you?
It's an even number. I could see the appeal of that, but it's just hard because the difference between like a 50% movie and a 75% movie and a 100% movie is huge. Because, you might have a 75 or you might have like a 90, but it's not quite 100. So, I don't know. Not enough nuance.
Yeah. Anything left unsaid as we wrap up our conversation about Some Like It Hot?
I was very happy to watch a movie on this list that I was really excited to see and that it was a lot of fun.
Yeah, because the past bunch have been kind of...
Yeah, so it feels like reinvigorating because like this is why I wanted to do the film history list, is to find these like little kernels where it's like I've been meaning to watch this for ages and I'm so excited to watch it, and just knowing that it pays off is really excellent.
Right. So catch us in the next episode where we're going to be watching and talking about The Apartment, also directed by Billy Wilder and starring Jack Lemmon.
I'm so excited.
And continue on with us as we count down towards, pause it for me, episode 60, which will in fact be the final episode.
Mm-hmm.
So
stay tuned.
Stay tuned for that in a couple weeks/months.
All right. See ya.
Bye-bye.
Bye.